just answering questions with WAPTech today. A cult that was started by Cyrus Reed Teed. He woke up thinking he was literally the reincarnation of Jesus Christ after he electrocuted himself accidentally. That's his self-ascribed meaning. He's one of these people who believe the earth was hollow, etc. 1692, Edmund Halley, the guy who gave the name to Halley's Comet, wrote of a hollow earth and said, "If I shall seem to advance anything that looks like extravagant or romantic, the reader is desired to suspend his censure till he have considered the force and number of the many arguments which concur to make good so new and so bold a supposition. Suspend your disbelief until I finished gish galloping." The guy whose name is why we call it Halley's Comet did that. You're allowed to take down your idols and analyze them and then put them back up on the pedestal once in a while. Did he remark later that he was completely wrong about his assertions? You might want to look that up. So in 2019, someone posted the following as if it's somehow an indisputable fact that everybody should know, and if they don't, they're too stupid or something. The core of the middle of the earth is nothing. Proof? Yeah, that would be handy. What's in the middle of a magnetic field? The earth has a north and south pole. And there's your dinner. So no, you don't get posted. When you do a drive-by like that, lately I've gotten to the point that if somebody isn't willing to stop doing neeners, I do actually delete their comments. Yes, the origin story for a lot of your beliefs, it's not a new one, is that the earth could be hollow. The idea with this is that by modeling the earth as a hollow object, you could be making it out of something much more dense, because we didn't understand orbital mechanics very well. Simple mathematics using masses and attractions didn't work. So in desperation, people would remap the various bodies as hollow objects. Why not? Because they're not. It was a silly way of getting around a math error. Sort of like deciding there was an extra planet when there wasn't, because the perturbations that were seen in the orbit of Neptune or Uranus were miscalculations and bad measurements because we had shit equipment to work with. There's a margin of error this big, and we get an answer over here. But we don't like that answer because it's not right in the middle of the margin error, so let's decide it's another planet perturbing it instead of just saying we've made an error. That lesson, the Planet X lesson, taught us to understand that if your margin of error is plus or minus 10%, don't assume you're going to run into things that make sense. If it's down to 1%, you shouldn't either. 1 part per million is a much better way of starting. Then you can say you found something. And just sort of like the escalation of how far you have to recede away from the universe to find an anomaly, we're now at the point that we're looking for a planet 9 by looking out dozens and dozens of times further out into space than Pluto, and the person doing that is the guy who helped demote Pluto by saying it wasn't a planet, but desperately looking for planet 9, while Pluto's just sitting there saying, "You never loved me." When you find an anomaly, don't assume it's something mysterious, just assume you made an error. We still haven't learned this. Yes, I'm saying that looking for planet 9 was probably caused by us making a stupid measurement error, because at this point, the scale, the escalation, the order of magnitude actually matches the same error from that one that caused us to have the Planet X idea in the first place. Every single scientist that goes to the papers and talks about the research is, by definition, an asshole, because they always create these problems. How do 911 truthers who always get caught making fake proof or refusing to recant when they're peer-reviewed and found to be an error, or when they're shown to have flat-out fabricobbled and just lied? Truthers always lie. How do 9/11 truthers peer-review FEMA, NIST, National Institutes of Standards and Technology, or anybody else on World Trade Center 7, 1, and 2? You already know what this is going to be about. So someone posted a link, which is now in archive.is, so that you don't have to go to the page anymore, about how 9/11 truthers actually do peer review, but they ignore the peer review. They get peer reviewed on the internet because that's where they publish, on blogs. No, these are real articles. No, you point to someone's blog so they get the page hit so they can get the ad revenue. You didn't have a page you sent me that lists the actual locations where the peer reviews were posted to peer-reviewed journals, magazines, articles, groups. They're not peer-reviewed if you don't allow them to be reviewed by their peers. So it's not peer review. No, it's not on both sides. No, it's not a wash. No, all things aren't equal. No. But anyway, the assertion is, at the bottom of the article, this is what caught my attention, the NIST report has never been peer reviewed. This is a contradiction in terms because of what the actual NIST report is. Not what it says, but what it is. A little background. The cleanup of the World Trade Center site resulted in the destruction of a majority of the building's steel components, is the assertion. And this is even repeated in the Wikipedia article as a basis for people getting angry about this. 95% of the structural beams and plates and 50% of the reinforcement bars, however, were recovered. So if you have 95% of the basically the structure, we're going to say at least half. Why would you say the majority of the building's steel components were destroyed? That's in the Wikipedia article. We even have contradictions within 4 sentences, by the way, of these assertions. No agency originally had been appointed in advance to investigate any kind of building collapses in the United States. It was usually handled by the local authorities, which is always a bad idea if they might be implicated. There was some confusion about who had the authority to carry out an official investigation for September 11th of the Twin Towers, World Trade Center 7, and the rest, also of the Pentagon. The air traffic controller people and FAA are responsible for analyzing air impacts, and they retrieved what they could from it, and we are finding pieces even today from those impacts because it was such, I don't know if you understand this, if a plane hits a building 1,000 feet up almost, hundreds of feet up anyway, hard enough to throw parts multiple blocks away, and we find those pieces 10 years later, that's an indication of how much force was involved, alright? But anyway, let's move on. Let's ignore that, right? Because peer reviewing is only for people who believe what they believe. Anyway. But anyway, the official investigation, well, they didn't have anybody aligned for that. They didn't have a building collapse analysis group for the United States government or for even a state. So, anyway, in pop culture sources, news, the fires were originally said to have melted the floors and columns, including showing a picture of someone pointing a bright light into a hole in the ground and saying they're looking at molten metal, when they absolutely were not. They were looking for survivors or talking to workers underneath a bunch of material, but it wasn't on fire or molten metal. And yes, 911 truthers always lie. They keep showing that picture. How could you get this close to molten metal? Well, it wasn't molten metal, you assholes. There is not equality here. But let's move on. Numerous structural engineers and experts speaking to the media describe what they thought caused the towers to collapse. These experts are just the same pundits you're dealing with today, except that at least some of these pundits were college teachers or engineers, and what they did is they tried to describe what probably caused it. And a lot of their quotes were taken as being a really good way to disprove later assessments when people actually had hands-on material work, actually touching evidence rather than just guessing. So let's go back to looking at guessers, because we have YouTube videos of it and sound bites and play propaganda games. No, I'm not going to let go of this. I'm that damn mad dog that won't let go of, you have to own this shit, not both sides. Following pressure from technical experts, industry leaders, and families of victims, this is an assertion in the Wikipedia article. I'm just reading the same one you guys have been messing with for the last 2 weeks. Yes, somebody's been mashing together a Wikipedia article. May 2002 FEMA Building Performance Study report had been published, and they kept criticizing. It wasn't funded very well, it didn't have any authority to demand evidence, and it had limited access to the materials and the site, so it asked people to provide the equipment and materials. And that's the FEMA study. So it was criticized by technical experts, industry leaders, and families of victims for good reason. And again, until this date, we did not have a national analysis of buildings that have been hit by airplanes division, because that literally just doesn't happen very often. Congress passed the National Construction Safety Team Bill October of 2002 for one purpose: to create a national construction safety team. Right? No, to investigate one frickin' thing. To do the NIST report. It gave the National Institute, yada yada yada, the authority to conduct an investigation of the World Trade Center collapses as they saw fit, with only a few instructions. The claim is this has never been peer reviewed. Why would you claim something like that when you claim peer review amounts to making a blog post? Your blogs are the peer review. Other people peer reviewed this. I'm peer reviewing it now, but it's never been submitted to peer review. A $16 million budget for a 3-year investigation to only identify the following: the sequence of events that triggered a structural failure and progressive collapse of the World Trade Center complex. Any and all of them. The report for World Trade Center 7 concluded no blast sounds were heard on audio or video footage or reported by witnesses. That's the only thing that they brought up as a conclusion about really that. And this was the NIST report's crew. Oh, you didn't know it wasn't just NIST. NIST is not able to do a peer-reviewed study properly. They're not. They're National Institute of yada yada yada. Let's read that back. National Institute of Standards and Technology. All they do is set standards. They're an institute. So, who actually did this report? Well, it's just NIST, because conspiracy theorists, 911 truthers always lie. This was done by NIST, Structural Engineering Institute of American Society of Civil Engineers, Society of Fire Protection Engineers, National Fire Protection Association, the American Institute of Steel Construction, Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat, the Structural Engineers Association of New York, and Simpson, Gumpson, and Hager Engineering Corporation. For the purpose of peer review. But anyway, let's say they never got a peer review. They're also contributing to it, so you could say there's a conflict of interest. The NIST report has been widely criticized in peer review all over the fucking planet, but let's say it wasn't peer reviewed. Because truthers always lie. It developed models to determine how the collapse was triggered, but not on events after that point. This was the main thing people criticized. It also made conclusions based on not having as much physical evidence as you would like, ideally, and it was done a while later if you didn't know that. Also, the Journal of Research of the National Institute of Standards and Technology is their flagship peer-reviewed scientific journal that has been publishing since 1904. And it's run by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and that is a physical sciences lab and non-regulatory agency of the United States Department of Commerce, because it's just a science lab. They do experiments and testing. Napon would be more reasonable and might explain the fact that there was no steel beam standing except close to the street level. That's not really true, by the way. Photos of buildings from World War II had bombed hundreds of times. The skyscrapers shows the metal beams are still standing. Even Hiroshima had structured beams standing close to the ground zero. Ground zero in the Hiroshima bombing was thousands of feet above the ground. World War II bombings happened within the buildings to blow out from the bottom up in a cone shape because they went into the basements. This has been covered already. But thank you for your comment. The person who left the link to the non-peer-reviewed fake 911 truther pile, thank you very much for your posting. The peer review has been done of them. They lied. Thanks for watching. Bye.